welcome to another episode of the HAGtivistPodcast. As humanists, we are concerned with the promotion of reason and human well-being. We'll be discussing interesting developments in Ghana and the rest of Africa, around the world, and in science and technology. Today is the 1st of August. My name is Monica and I'm joined by
Samuel,
Echo,
Kwabna, and
Rosalind.
And today we're very lucky to have some very special guests. Pani, the president of the Humanists Association of Ghana, will be joining us. And two very key members of the association are also here. Please introduce yourselves, gentlemen.
I am Samuel Edueji, student.
Kwajoa Samuel, student also. In Ghana news, a man was arrested last Sunday at the Assemblies of God Church at the Ring Road in Accra for having a weapon, a handgun. When questioned, he claimed he was there to assassinate the president. That church happens to be where the president of Ghana frequents. And so this became a whole issue. He was, after 48 hours, or within 48 hours, put before the law courts and sentenced to 10 years in prison.
So this man, Charles Antwi, was tried and convicted for the charge of unlawful possession of a firearm, which carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. However, with no representation, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Now, the crimes that he has been accused of are certainly serious crimes. Plotting to kill the elected president of the Republic of Ghana is a treasonous offense, and the maximum punishment for treason in Ghana is the death penalty. But he wasn't charged for treason. He wasn't exactly charged with conspiracy to kill the president either, because conspiracy involves more than one party. What he was charged with was the unlawful possession of a firearm. And like I said earlier, that only has a maximum sentence, I believe, of 5 years in prison. Yet somehow, without representation, without any question about his sanity, which has come into question since he was convicted, without any due process whatsoever, he was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison. And the humanist aspect of this is that, where's the due process? Where was his attorney? If he didn't have any lawyer, why didn't the court appoint one for him? I believe that under the laws of this country, which are in concurrence with the Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations, everyone has the right to representation in court matters. Yeah, this man was convicted in record time, in 48 hours, like you said, without due process, without representation, with nothing.
This case has interested me as well because it talks a lot about how Ghana has a very bad judicial system in terms of investigating cases, how evidence is kept. A lot of things have come into play. Listening on radio during this whole issue, when this issue happened, people have been saying and doubting whether the handgun was really the one presented by the police was even the one that the man was said to be holding, whether the man was of sound mind, whether there were any other witnesses other than the one person who claims to have alerted people that they had seen him, he or she had seen him with in possession of the firearm in church. The fact that, yes, he did not have any representation in court. So many things have come up about this case, and it says a lot about us as Ghanaians and how we deal with cases. There are people's cases on murder, rape, and countless other issues which have been there for years and have not seen the light of day in court. And yet, this case was somehow taken to be the most important case, and within 48 hours for the guy to be convicted. So we should take another look at this and reassess ourselves as Ghanaians on how to deal with it.
Does anyone know if there's going to be an appeal? Because we feel that due process was not done, the guy did not get justice. Does anyone know?
Yeah. The human rights lawyer, Francis Xavier Susu, and the firm is trying to appeal the case on Monday, hopefully.
Okay. So hopefully they can appeal, and then the court would say that he should be taken to see a psychiatrist before trial, because he probably doesn't even understand all that is happening around him. And I have followed the story, and I personally think the guy has unsound mind. One, this is somebody who says that he was supposed to be president before Mills died, or after Mills died. Yeah, and then somehow, if you listen to him, then it means that Mahama, the current president, usurped his right, to ascend the office. And news journalists have been to, the guy used to be a taxi driver. They've been to where his station, and they spoke with some of his former colleagues, and they all said they felt that the guy had a problem, and so even various times they tried to distance himself from him. And they've had discussions with him where he said that he wanted to kill Gaddafi as well. Then they interviewed his mother. His mother also says that the son has a mental problem. So it's weird that someone like that can be charged for. Even it's. I don't know how the police did their job, but professionally, if you're a police officer and you arrest someone with a gun on him in a church where the president visits, okay, just by questioning, you would know whether the person should. You should refer the person to, before you even go to court, you would know that this guy is not of sound mind, and you can tell the judge that no, you think that the person should, even before the issues of he hasn't got a lawyer comes in and blah blah blah.
I think that was done, but the judge dismissed, did not grant them.
The police actually told the judge that they feel the guy has a mental.
Yeah,
The judge,
the lawyer, what's the name? Augustine Jenfi told the court that
he feels that the guy has
go for a psychiatrist.
And the judge dismissed.
there was an article that I read that during proceedings, the judge initially thought that he was of unsound mind until he mentioned that he had frequented the church more than 3 times, and so he knew that was. Then he must have been on sound mind. Yes, that doesn't prove it exactly, but I'm saying that was what happened, and the judge made up his own mind.
Okay, so then the judge, I think the judge was using premeditation, the guy was premeditated.
Yes.
That kind. So maybe that is how. Anyway, we want to say something, Monica.
Just a quick thing. Even if the police think that he's on sound mind, he still has to go before a court, and then the court has to
exactly. That's my point.
A psychiatrist, and then just a refresher about the whole due process thing. Even if he was of sound mind and he came before the court and said that he's guilty, there still needs to be proceedings. There needs to be a trial. They need to call witnesses. Yeah. He needs to be defended, and then you can convict him or not. And none of this went through. None of this happened. Like within an hour, he's sentenced to 10 years in prison. In my opinion,
crime that should have sent him for 5 years.
Right. In my opinion, it's a clear miscarriage of justice in the least. And then and in the worst case, you've sent a man of unsound mind to prison. So, like Samuel was saying, I hope that the appeal goes through and we get a proper evaluation and a proper trial.
Do you think the judge should be sanctioned for not following due process?
No, I think judges make mistakes all the time. I don't think it should be sanctioned, but I think that there needs to be a review. If it affects the judge professionally in terms of promotions and stuff, then that's fine. But to be punished for this, I don't think so, because there's a lot going on. It's the president, a lot of the police and everything do their work more efficiently for some reason, but
so
I don't think the judge should be punished.
Pressure from
yes, I do.
From the executive arm of the government?
Not per se. And not even necessarily internationally, not even intentionally. Sorry, not intentionally, but I think that there was some pressure on the judge to act, and because
isn't the job of a judge not to feel the pressure?
But the judge is a human being.
But you have to be objective in certain cases. You don't discriminate based on what kind of case it is.
It's a human being. This is an incident which involves an attempted or assassination on the President of the Republic.
Wasn't even there.
It wasn't there, but this is somebody who. So I agree with the core. I don't think sanctioning a judge for something like. I mean, especially if she has no history of such errors, then yeah.
Is it an error if the judge doesn't follow, the court doesn't follow due process? I don't think that's.
If the person has no history, has such a history, then I can say something. But if the person has a history, then it really isn't. We can't. It's difficult to pardon.
Well, my view is of a drift here. The problem here is, one, if I have a license for a gun and I acquire a gun and I'm in the same church with the president, does that mean I want to kill him?
No. First of all, he did not have
a license.
A license, and he confessed that he was trying to kill him.
If you read the judgment, it's like he was possessing a gun in the church of the president.
Yes.
That was just the provisional judgment.
Okay.
But the guy has confessed that he told his interrogators and the court that
his intention was to kill the president.
But initially he denied it. He said, no, I was not the one. And later he confirmed he's the one. So you could see that there was some inconsistency in the way he was speaking. And he needed some IQ test first. But
some psychiatric evaluation.
It could be that the police influenced him to do that.
It seems like there's someone who can easily influence.
Yeah. That is why I think that judicial process aside, this case should also awaken people up to the realities of the issues around mental health. And how we don't take mental health seriously in this country. So if someone who should belong to a psychiatric ward is sent to prison, we can imagine how many people out there are in prisons who should be in a mental institution.
Okay, so just a quick follow-up to that. Yeah, that's true. Very serious. Mental health is a very, very serious issue. I remember I had a friend who told me that one time, when she was younger, like a teenager, let's say 12, 13 years, she used to read a lot. So at a point, she felt that she wasn't all right. And because she'd been reading, she could find the symptoms of depression. Like she would say, now, if I'm doing this, I'm probably depressed. Mm-hmm. She was living with an auntie, and then she walks up to the auntie and tells the auntie that, auntie, I think I have a problem. What do you think is a problem? I think I may have
depression.
I'm suffering from depression. And then the auntie was like, oh, come on, you read too much. You know, white people fuck you up. So you end up thinking that you end up giving names. They give names to things that don't exist. You know, yeah. And just like that, it was trivialized and dismissed. You know. So at the end of the day, she had to keep whatever her issues were to herself. And it's all over. It's all over. It's all around us. It's all around us, and we need to do better than that. Anyway,
to add to that, Charles Antwi. When the mother was interviewed, when the mother realized Charles had a mental problem, guess where she took him?
To a prayer camp.
The church.
Wow.
This week, Obama made a visit to Africa, and he visited two countries, Kenya, which is his father's homeland, and Ethiopia, where he became the first United States president to address African Union Congress. And Obama's visits, even though people speculated that spread U.S. hegemonic agendas on the continent, it's also touched on some key issues which were protection of basic human rights, which have been contentious on the continent recently. He touched on gay rights, which were very, very controversial, which his counterpart presidents who took different sides with him, and also touched on repression in governments, specifically Ethiopia, where they've been repressing journalists and free speech. So he also talked about term limits, which has also been another major issue on the continent, with unrest in countries like Burundi, where governments are just seeking to extend their terms and not listening to other views. So he talked about a lot of issues on the continent, and I think his visit, though, had a positive influence on the continent as for young people too. And
so there are some people who think that in his critique of human rights issues, he didn't go far enough. The main one that was the most contentious one was the gay rights issue, which he addressed in a joint press conference with the president of Kenya, President Kenyatta. And, I think I agree with people who say that he didn't go far enough on that issue. He addressed it at a press conference where President Kenyatta expected him to address this issue, and then President Kenyatta came out and said, in Africa we have so many problems, these are not the main issues. So once we finish dealing with those issues like you have done in America, then we will deal with gay rights when it becomes a priority, which I think is a cop-out. In the past, American presidents, including President Obama himself, have found ways to address certain issues, including human rights issues, in a way that is more powerful and less susceptible to stupid comeback, if I may say so myself. When Obama went to Egypt in his first trip abroad as president, he spoke to students and talked about human rights, especially the right to vote. And that's what sparked the uprisings across the Middle East that became known as the Arab Spring. There was nobody there, no other president there when he addressed the students to say, hey, Mr. Obama, democracy is for the West. In Arab, something else works for us. He spoke directly to the people, and through that, they were able to rise up and demand their rights more. I feel like on this trip, Obama could have done something similar and spoke and directed this message to younger people and to students rather than speaking in a joint press conference with President Kenyatta. In Ethiopia, I also feel he didn't go far enough. He talked about human rights, but Ethiopia is a country where 100% of the parliament belongs to the same party. Their elections are undemocratic. He said absolutely nothing about that and just talked about term limits and stuff that everybody knows already. So in some ways, it can be said that he just paid lip service to these issues and didn't really attack them like the way he could have and the way he has in the past.
Yeah, I think I slightly disagree with you. I see where you're coming from, but I feel like it's easier politically to make a strong statement when a vast majority of the people agree with those sentiments. Whereas, when it comes to something like gay rights, it is not a very popular opinion in Africa. Most people either don't know enough about it or are against it for reasons that are very, very weak reasons. But in either case, it's very difficult to come and make a very strong statement about that when the majority of the people don't even know that they are oppressing each other or don't think it's a priority. And also with gay rights or human rights in general, the reason why I agree with you is that I think we always use this example, but in the South of America, when there were oppression against Black or African Americans, and people said, we will come around to it, but it will take some time because the vast majority of people do not. We don't want to cause any kind of unrest, so we'll work on this, but in small steps. But I think the reason why they wanted to address it is because when it comes to human rights, it is now. Now is the best time to address it. It's not something that we should say, because of people's sensitivities, we're going to, work around that and make it a gradual process because people are dying in the process and people are being oppressed in the process.
So you think that he went far enough in his statements? I
don't think he made a strong statement about it. I think it was weak, but I feel like those are the reasons behind that.
But I feel like if you're addressing a country that's not your own country, it's different. Like he wasn't always a public supporter of gay rights in America.
Yeah.
But that's because public sentiment, and he depended on that to be elected. But in Africa, nobody in Africa is going to elect him.
You don't think it would be a little bit hypocritical for him to make a strong statement about gay rights when they only just accepted gay marriage in the US.
I think that in this case, it's always a battle between American values and American interests. And American values are for democracy and liberalness and freedom and the freedom to do what you want, freedom to be who you are, freedom to marry, blah blah blah. But American interests are different. America's security interests right now are paramount. Then next are their business interests, and I think those are the two main things that determine how he spoke to the African Union and how he spoke in Kenya. It's the same thing in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is one of their biggest partners, but they'll never go there and say, hey, you must allow women to drive, because American interests supersede American values. And to me, I think that's a mistake, personally.
And like you said, you made the point about how you don't see why he wouldn't make that strong of a statement when he's not trying to win elections or something. So that's a reason why he should be promoting the values over the and that's probably why he felt free enough to talk about some of these issues. But I think maybe an added reason would be because it is, and also you don't want to be seen as trying to impose your values.
Which is very, very, very keen, because even though he touched on some contentious issues, he's also here to promote U.S. interests, particularly in a time where Chinese influence is growing on the continent. So, he might have had some leeway to talk about these issues, but there were other deals and other things which he had to pursue. So, he could all he could do was talk against it and shed a little light on it. But these issues are very contentious, don't forget, on this continent. So, I think he went far enough, and other governments can do better, but I think he went far enough. And I'm looking for what he will do after his presidency, because he's not going to be dead after his 8 years. I think he will still be a diplomat.
But he wouldn't have as much influence.
Yeah, but he can still influence where there are necessary inputs from him. So we just leave it to him and see what America does on the continent in the future. So
I think another opposing view I've been hearing is that people were actually upset that he would talk about gay marriage as well.
Yeah, some people think he went too far.
Yeah, that shows how deeply divisive these issues are. So he did what he could, and Obama, I know he's very liberal. I know Obama is very liberal, but even in America, there are opposing factions against some things like gay rights. Don't forget that there are elements in America who supported the no votes for legalization of gay marriage in Ireland. So that shows how much deep this thing is, even in his country, where they barely almost passed this thing. So he just had to show a bit caution in this issue. So he did his best, in my opinion. He did his best.
This week in world news, a group of extremist Israeli settlers in the Gaza Strip attacked a Palestinian family by burning down their house. That led to the injuries of every member of the family and the death of an 18-month-old baby. This is coming against the backdrop of the 51-day war last year that led to over 1,000 Palestinian deaths and over 66% civilians, according to the United Nations. And all this is happening in the context of the re-election of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the expansion of Israeli settlement in the West Bank. So the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described it as a terrorist attack, while the President of the Palestinian Authority described it as a war crime. Now, usually when Benjamin Netanyahu calls something a terrorist attack, it's usually Palestinians attacking Israeli civilians. This time, it was the reverse, and he's called it a terrorist attack. One key thing he didn't do when he usually describes other things as
terrorist.
Usually when he describes other things as terrorist attacks, Benjamin Netanyahu swears that, Israel will get revenge for the death of whoever has been killed. This time it was a Palestinian baby who was killed, and there was no promises for revenge made.
But he did mention that all of Israel's resources will be utilized in stopping such terrorists, whether they be on the Israeli side or on the Palestinian side, from ever happening again.
And I think the governing coalition has been shocked by these attacks, because all that's been in the news recently are Islamist extremists and Jewish extremists. The idea personally frightens me that there's another extremist faction to the growing number of extremists around the world, and it is never a good story for this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I think they need to resolve it and check these extremist elements in the Israeli society, because I think last 2 days some guy also stabbed people who were campaigning for gay rights in Israel, which shows the growing threat that is coming into the Israeli society. And
extremists,
the extremists, which are all under the pretext. And Israel is a near-theocratic society, and it all brings us back to how we run our societies and what we make lead us politically. If we make these elements lead us politically, then we will have these problems. And it's a model system for everyone around the world to see the insidiousness of allowing religion to conflict the states governing, which is leading Israeli policy. So they need to check that, and they will curb these extremism before it adds to the growing number of extremists around the world.
I think it's interesting that you brought that up. I just want to clarify for the listeners. So a few days ago, an ultra-conservative Hasidic Jewish man attacked, he stabbed 6 people at a gay pride march in Jerusalem, or was it Tel Aviv or Jerusalem? Yeah. I think it was 6.
Tel Aviv, yeah.
In Tel Aviv. And the crazy thing about this man was that this is 2015.
He's done it before.
He did it in 2005. He stabbed 4 people in 2005. And he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He just got out and went right back to this thing. This is somebody who you can tell is passionate about his cause. I'm not endorsing it, but he's passionate about his cause of anti this thing. So yes, this attack on the Palestinian family comes as part of a wave of Jewish extremist violence. And a lot of the time when you think of extremists, or when people think of extremist violence, they think of, Islamists and this thing. But it can take any form. The most important thing that I want to point out is that if we didn't have religions in this world, this kind of violence would not exist.
Okay, so having heard this atrocity committed by Israelis against Palestinians, and in the past we've also witnessed atrocities committed by Israeli forces against the people of Palestine, brutal atrocities. My question is, do you still think that these are the chosen people of God? Think about it.
Ebola is in the news again, but this time for very good reasons. A vaccine trial in Guinea against the Ebola virus has shown 100% potency against the virus. Now, this is very good and welcome news. This trial has started in December 2013 in Guinea, and scientists are hoping that when more tests are carried out, the success rate will be between 75 to 100% potency, and that is very good news for an epidemic of the stature of Ebola. The world is getting prepared. With this vaccine, we can all get vaccinated, and should the epidemic strike again, its toll on lives should be much, much less.
Yeah, this is a very significant news for.
Do you say December 2013?
Yeah.
13?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is significant news for we the sub-region, the West African sub-region, because we have been dogged by this Ebola issue, and a lot had happened in the week of it, and subsequent government reactions to the Ebola. I think the World Health Organization came under a lot of criticism over its handling of this issue, but together with the various pharmaceutical companies, they've managed to come up with a potent vaccination for this. This just, I think, casts the light on the kind of health system that we have here. And going forward, this is good news, but I think we have to do more as people who in the sub-region and who are worst affected by these. We have to do more for our health systems to be able to be ready for these kind of epidemics on the global scale as a whole. So it is very significant news, and we are very happy to get such good news on this virus. Yeah.
When you say we have to do more, how do you mean?
Yeah. Well, we saw that our capacity for handling the issue was veritably very low, and even with coming up with a vaccine for this disease, which is endemic on the African continent, we virtually made no attempts at coming to it, and we also had to rely on foreign people and international bodies to come up with it. We are not saying this is bad in itself, but it just shows how unprepared we are as a continent on the whole for these kind of emergencies. So I think we just have to come up with better solutions next time.
Not to mention, as a country, while the technocrats in the health industry were making positive efforts to be part of this process, trying to discover a vaccine and immunology and all of that, the elected officials were standing in their way. So the most powerful people in the country were working against the efforts of people trying to find a solution to this problem.
Yeah, I think
so we do need to do more.
Those
like you were saying,
knee-jerk reactions. We
Yes,
were all
exactly.
very scared
Exactly.
when this virus started, and we didn't know how to deal with it. Even to the point where we should have tried vaccines here and we rejected it. So it just shows how we reacted to this. It was very all over the place. And
I think that the approach that GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, and Johnson & Johnson was a bit, bringing it to Ghana was a bit far away from the problem. So that's a reason why people will be panicked about it, because we're like, we don't have it here. So it wasn't even. But then I think the Merck approach, going towards the source of it. I'm sure GSK also did that around places where there were large infection rates of Ebola. So I think that their success probably due to the fact
Merck's approach was very good. It was very good. They got people who were
families
patients
and things
and
like
families.
that. Those are more willing volunteers.
But Ebola is a virus. That means that when people contract it and they survive it, they become immune to it. It doesn't make any sense to conduct Ebola vaccine tests on Ebola survivors.
Well, they don't become immune.
Survivors.
They don't become immune.
No, they do.
There are
This was
instances
actually
where
not on survivors.
men
This was
who
on
have
people
survived
who were
actually
around
passed
people.
the virus through their sperm.
Then it must have been no.
No,
But they
that's
themselves
correction.
they themselves were immune.
No, they weren't. If they passed the virus on, they weren't.
The
immune.
fact that
They are hosts.
they're
but
hosts.
they're
But
immune.
they're still immune.
Yeah.
They're still immune. They're not going to
But
die.
the example I'm giving here is not people who have survived it. These are people that were current patients of it, and their family
they
members
set
were
rings
not.
around them.
Yes.
Yeah.
The family members were the ones who did.
Yeah, who took part in the
underwent
vaccination
the
trials.
trials.
But I'm saying, what is so special about their family members that
They are more willing
Because
because it's
they
close
have
to
a
home.
case of Ebola. Because Ghana hadn't recorded any case of Ebola. So
I don't see why that's no reason why we should test the Ebola vaccine. First of all, the vaccine that they tested does not have the Ebola virus.
Not the Merck one. The Merck one did, but the GSK one did not. But I'm saying that the reason why there are less willing participants is probably because there
weren't any cases.
Yeah, but if it's not, if the GSK one, which was the one that's being tested here, does not have the Ebola virus, then what is the?
There is an
But
issue of
the main contention was there weren't
let's clarify. Let's clarify that. The GSK vaccine that was being tested here does not contain the Ebola virus.
There's an issue here of uninformed populace.
Yes.
And that is the biggest stumbling block we have as a community, because the populace were not informed. Once they had Ebola trials, they all jumped to conclusions like it was an exercise.
Yes.
There's a general distrust of pharmaceutical companies, of course, because they do have a history of testing unsafe drugs and spreading disease. So it's a little bit. It's unfounded that people will be panicking about this, but Ebola is pretty serious. So nobody wants to take chances.
Well, I don't think there was no announcement. Sorry, there was no announcement at the area where the vaccines were tested. Mm-hmm. There were announcements, but political parties took advantage of it To be precise, the opposition New Patriotic Party took advantage of it because they have less vote in the voter region, just to blackmail the NDC that even you vote massively for them, but they are trying the Ebola vaccines on you.
I think that's speculation because I think that's speculation.
So my point here is, even if you take the parliamentarians, they have no idea about what a vaccine is. That was what Professor
Dudu said. Yes. No, you're right. But I don't think it falls clearly on political lines. After all, who invited Professor Dudu to Parliament? It was the Speaker of Parliament, who is not an MPP member. You understand what I'm saying? And the Water Regional Minister, who is also a member of Parliament from Water, was part of the people who called Professor Dudu to testify. So I don't think it's clearly political. Yes, the opposition tried to this thing, but the ruling party also made it a big deal once it came out to this thing. Yeah. What you're saying is exactly right. When the trials started, the people in the part of the water region that the trials were taking place had already been informed. They went to see their chiefs, and they had already started the trials. And Professor Dudu was on TV3 yesterday. He was saying that the Ebola trial is not even the first kind of trial that they had in that part of the country. They've even had malaria trials over there. So when they're dealing, they used to go. Professor Dudu is an employee of the World Health Organization. They used to go directly to the people, go to the chiefs and say, "Hey, this is what we're doing." Blah 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 blah. Once it came out and it came to Accra, that's when the panic.
But you agree that malaria is something people will be more willing to try.
Of course. But
Yeah,
all I'm saying is that
it's something they've seen before.
all I'm saying is that when it came to Ebola, the people of where the trial was taking place had been informed, like someone has already said. They were informed.
The concerns raised by most Ghanaians were, to me, they were legitimate, because if you consider
which ones were legitimate?
If you consider that there were no cases here which could be tested against the Ebola, and you see MEC's approach, MEC went to an area which has Ebola infections. They got people who had been infected, and they could get the necessary trials on them. That was the condition.
You can't test it on people who are. You can't test it on people who are
maybe
infected.
A neutral area.
Yes. People who had direct contacts. Because MEC's approach was they had the families of them to create rings around them. That's people who have direct contact with Ebola patients every day. If we vaccinate them against them, they will come into contact with an Ebola patient every day. If we observe them for, say, for a week or a year, and see that after continuous contact with Ebola patients, still
they've developed immunity.
Yeah, they've developed immunity. Then that's the best option.
Yeah, because the article even said that GSK right now, they are running out of options because there are fewer and fewer cases, so it's difficult to tell who is.
But you can't confirm immunity
with someone who has already
or with
survived.
An antigen test. You can test for antigens present in the blood.
Yes.
So basically, the reason why I think the trials should take place in neutral countries like Ghana is that we are part of the sub-region. Nigeria is part of the sub-region. Nigeria was hit.
Yeah.
Nigeria, and we have very close trade relations with Nigeria. And the Volta region is the border town. It's the border region with Nigeria. So there's a high possibility that if Ebola does cross borders, it's going to cross borders through that region. Yeah. So we should be having those trials here, and we should be helping the scientific community prepare
for
the
an
whole
outbreak.
sub-region for an outbreak.
Not to mention that once we have these trials in Ghana, the trials don't just happen. There's an infrastructure, there's a healthcare infrastructure that comes with the trials. If we don't have the trials, we don't get that infrastructure. And that infrastructure not only helps to set up and do the trials, but it also helps to combat if we have, an outbreak. An example is isolation units, things like that, training and stuff like that. Things that we need but we don't have in this country. And so for me personally, that was the most the most annoying part of the parliamentarians getting in the way, preventing us from getting the know-how in the infrastructure to deal with a possible outbreak in the future?
Well, like, if you take Ghana, for instance, our approach to Ebola, I would say government has not done enough to the health sector. If you take the health personnel, both in school and those who are still at post, meaning doctors, medical doctors, nurses, so on and so forth. As it stands now, no one has been improved upon the way to tackle Ebola. If you take our school curriculum now, there is no introduction as to how to prevent the outbreak of Ebola. They are saying they have specialists, but these specialists I'm talking about, they are nowhere to be found.
Oh no! One of them lectured to us at the conference that we had at the beginning of the year. And not only that, the Professor Dodu, who you first mentioned in this podcast, he is the world's leading expert on pharmacology and immunology. The whole world.
But I think Sam's point is that
so
it needs to be a widespread education.
Yeah,
because the specialists may not be the first people to
but to say that they're
issue
nowhere to be found, that's not
with the
that's
issue
not
of
fair.
deficient health systems, it was something which was observed when the outbreak
That's not a
first
secret.
occurred
That's not a
among the
secret. The fallacy of today's episode is the argument from silence, which basically is that the lack of a counter-argument to your argument does not make your argument valid. For example, if you and a friend are having a conversation about sports, and your friend says that Hearts of Oak is the best football club in the whole world, just because nobody is there to counter that argument does not necessarily mean that Hearts is the best team in the world.
I'll add to that a very frequent one. The one people say, oh, gay people are just about having anal sex. Just because you say that somewhere and nobody comes to tell you or point out to you that not all gay people are involved or have anal sex, does not mean that your argument is valid. It is
and
fallacious.
I think finally a very common one too is when people say that there are no easy explanations to how life started on Earth. That means a creator, created human beings or other organisms on the planet.
Today's quote is from President Barack Obama, who said on a recent visit to Kenya that when you start treating people differently, not because of any harm they are doing to anybody, but because they are different, that's the path whereby freedoms begin to erode and bad things happen.
So we've come to the end of this week's episode of the HAGtivist Podcast. We'd like to hear from you. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us on Facebook as HAGtivist Podcast, as HAGtivist Podcast on SoundCloud, and you can email us on HAGtivistPodcast@gmail.com or find us on Twitter with the handle @HAGtivist. Before we go, let's remember to always think for ourselves and to care for others. Thank you.